This is the sort of test you dream about. First you go to the Ferrari factory in Maranello and have a poke around whilst they dig out an F12 Berlinetta for you. Some nice prototypes of the new LF there. Oh, and a few £1 million worth of 250 GTO. Finally, F12 located, we roll out of the famous factory gates and head south. The Berlinetta's front engine layout says GT car, but its performance figures scream supercar. To decide which it is, we've got two very special cars waiting for it on some sunny, deserted roads up in the Italian hills. To test its supercar credentials, we've got the Lamborghini Aventador. And to test its GT credentials, we've got the Aston Martin Vanquish. Now, before we go into all the driving stuff and what a good GT it is, we've got to say something about this steering wheel. Well, it's just bizarre when you look at it first of all. It's square, basically, and yet it's actually really lovely to hold. It just works. It really is the most costing of the cars here, and it's so soothing. Around town, you can just listen to the burble of the engine. The suspension soaks everything up, and you really can't imagine crossing continents in the Vanquish. However, when you get to roads like this, they're fairly broken, to be honest. It's like the Italians really haven't got quite enough money to repair their roads. They're even worse than the British ones. So you do need to press both the dampers and the sport button, because otherwise the body control just loses it, to be honest. So we know the Vanquish has got it as a GT car, but it has also got 565 brake horsepower, a carbon fibre body. So it ought to cut it as a sports car, a supercar really as well. It's the top of the Aston range. It's here that, to be honest, it does just fall down slightly. Part of the problem is the gearbox. It's still a ZF torque converter, and it works, it's not bad, but in the company it's keeping here, it just feels a bit lacklustre, to be honest. The steering's actually really nice. I can just feel it losing control of the bumps there. One thing it does lack is it just feels like the diff doesn't quite lock up enough, so you can have some fairly big smoky sort of sideways. It just doesn't have the precision of the F12 at all. And it never quite shrinks around you the way the other cars here do. Certainly sounds every bit as good as the other two cars here though. That V12 is absolutely epic. Next up is Sant'Agata's finest, the mighty Lamborghini Aventador. 690 brake horsepower, 509 pounds-foot of torque, and four-wheel drive all help it to a stunning 0 to 60 time of just 2.8 seconds. The first thing to say about this car, rather the same way we talked about the square steering wheel in the Aston Martin, is whoever specced matte black paint with orange calipers, thank you. It looks just sensational. The second thing to say about this particular Aventador is that it's on winter tyres. You get a certain amount of squirm as a result. You shouldn't drive an Aventador like this, but it's just amazing. The weight transfer in it is very scary, to be honest, the first time it happens, because it's got a lot of momentum, that big V12 behind me. But for some reason, it just works. This is a proper big boy supercar. The settings, the only ones you need to worry about, put the gearbox at sport, turn it to manual, and then turn the ESC off. Otherwise it just grabs way too much, possibly because of the winter tyres. But those are the settings we've all decided this car works best in. Sitting in this car is just pure theatre. It's exactly the same as it is to look at. You sit low, you've got a real pillar box windscreen to look out of. These A-pillars, they're massively annoying when I was driving home last night, because you can't see around them. You keep sort of looking one side then the other. But it feels so special. The gearbox
now feels like it really works. This single clutch gearbox, yeah, it's probably not quite as swift as the Ferrari's double clutch, but the changes, there's a lovely flare of revs on the downshift, if you see what I mean. Strangely, this car actually gives you more confidence than either of the front engine cars when you first jump into it. The steering's heavier and you really feel like you can point the nose where you want it. But then as you up the game, that momentum gets going and it feels like a proper scary experience. In sport, we've got most of the power going to the rear wheels, and I mean really most of the power. And the traction it gets is still astounding. On these winter tyres, you get it moving around between the corners. It's definitely between the Aventador and the F12 as to which is faster across the ground. Although this is actually giving away power to the F12, I think the four-wheel drive, sheer traction of it, means that it would certainly be as quick as the F12 across the ground. One thing strangely, although this has got big carbon discs, just like the other two cars, you do get some brake fade in this. Whether it's because you're working it harder because you get more confidence too, I don't know. But the pedal does go a little bit long after a good strop. Just feel that momentum build through a corner, and it seems to hang on to it, which is quite intimidating, but it's so flipping exciting to drive this car. It's as exciting to drive as it is to look at, and I can't pay a much bigger compliment than that.
All of which brings us to the Ferrari. Its 6.3 litre V12 is the most powerful engine here. The 0 to 60 time of 3.1 seconds makes it the quickest road-going Ferrari ever built. It has undoubtedly the most tech of the group too, and the most sophisticated aerodynamics. And it also looks like the most compact car here.
But how does it compare to the Aventador as a supercar proposition? Well, if I tell you that a couple of old Italians pulled up in a Punto and they didn't even pay this one bit of attention, they walked straight over to the Lambo. I think that tells you all you need to know about the presence. It can't compete with the Aventador on looks. But to drive, this is just insane. Where the Aventador is a big bruising, it's kind of an old school supercar, this feels like new generation. The engine's so intense, you have to be absolutely on it. And the steering, it's so sharp. The gear change is just, well, I don't think there's a better gear change out there, frankly. It's even wilder than a 458, this. It's just crazy. We've had some wet weather here over the last couple of days. My word, you can barely use 30% of the performance. You just tread on the throttle so gingerly. You need the hands of a surgeon and the feet of a ballet dancer, to be honest, to kind of keep this thing all pointing the way you want, which isn't always in a straight line, to be honest. In some ways, it's quite hard to get into a rhythm with this car because it's so edgy, and you just feel like you've had Red Bull sort of intravenously piped into your veins. The Aventador probably flows slightly better, but this is just the biggest adrenaline hit out there. It's phenomenal. 730 brake horsepower, just trying to put it through the rear wheels. So how does the F12 stack up as a GT car? Well, put in auto for a moment, sacrilege I know, and cruise along. It works. It's definitely not as impractical as the Aventador, but it never lets you forget that it's a sports car at heart, supercar at heart, I suppose. The seats are definitely firmer than the Vanquish, and even on the motorway, it still thumps across the expansion joints. You can put it in the bumpy road setting, as it says on here, with the dampers, and it does work. You know, it's perfectly comfortable, but it always feels slightly like it's straining at the leash. It's like one of those energetic dogs that never seems to run out of energy. As soon as you get up from the chair, it's, ooh, we playing, let's go. So it would never really relax you across a long journey, but you could definitely do it, and you certainly fit a lot of luggage in. And when you got there, my word, you would have the most awesome time. The F12, well, it's not as good a GT as the Vanquish, and no, it hasn't got the theatre of the Aventador, but for a front-engine supercar, this thing is just incredible. I don't think anybody could have a problem with calling this a properly usable supercar. It sort of redefines that term.
It really was as magical a test as we had hoped and dreamed it would be. One that we'll talk about for years to come. These are 3 astonishing, spine-tingling, occasionally flaming V12 supercars. They make you want to keep driving until the light or the road runs out.